All right, peace, peace. Hopefully, the audio in my microphone is all right. ETM, I want to say ETM Hotep. This is Brother Wujau, and normally when I go live, I try to wait a while in the beginning, give some time for people to tune in and things like that. But I'm going live pretty much unannounced. I announced earlier inside of the group that I had planned on doing a very quick lesson on Egyptian determinatives. And so one of the reasons why I'm doing it is for archive reasons for the group, to actually answer some questions or people wanted to know about determinatives and just more about the ancient Egyptian language and how it all works. So what I decided to do is just to put together very small bite-sized tidbits of information, nothing drawn out, nothing too long or anything like that, so that people can digest it and hopefully learn from it. And so I'm going to do a quick presentation on Egyptian determinatives and what they are. All right. And if people are tuned in while I'm doing this, I will take some questions and comments. I'll look at the chat. I will check into the chat and see if there's any questions or comments of people who may be viewing it. All right. So again, Rennie Wujau, my name is Wujau, and I'm just going to do this quick presentation. Hopefully you will benefit from it. All right. So what I have on the screen first is the glyphs that says Seshni Medu-Neter. And most people will know that term to be hieroglyphs or hieroglyphic writing. And so sometimes you see it as Sesh Medu-Neter, and sometimes you'll see it as Seshni Medu-Neter. All right. And I believe that music may be a little too loud. So let me see if I can do something about that. Okay. All right. Yeah. Just didn't want it to be like bone silent. All right. So just a little background music. All right. So, so what you see in the glyphs here at the top is the phrase Seshni Medu-Neter, which is the inscriptions of divine words. All right. And that's what people know as hieroglyphs. All right. So this is a quick lesson in determinatives. All right. And so again, today is Super Bowl Sunday, February 4th, I believe. And we're in the Amara Squad Facebook group. All right. Now, so before I get into determinatives, I do want to define a couple of terms that we should be familiar with. All right. And so the first term here is the word semantics or semantics. All right. We hear it used a lot, and some people actually misuse the term. But basically, semantics deals with meaning. Now, there's different branches of semantics as a professional discipline, in linguistics itself, or just the general term semantics. It no matter where, it all deals with meaning in some form or fashion. All right, so I'm just keeping it very simple and to the point. All right, that's what semantics means. And we hear it a lot of times when people are arguing or debating or something, and you may hear somebody say, well, I don't want to argue the semantics of it, or that's just semantics, or and really what they mean is, if you ever listen to two people argue sometimes, and you're not part of the argument, you're just observing the argument, and you are listening to both sides, and they're really saying the same thing, but to both parties, they think they're arguing. Well, that's an example of meaning the same thing, but arguing slightly different shading, and they emphasize the different shading as opposed to the overall sameness of the meaning. And so that's where you get into these semantic battles, which are pretty much unnecessary when you kind of step back and look at it. So it always takes that third person to say, hey, no need to argue, you all are saying the same thing. Well, anyway, that's sometimes how we hear the word semantics is being used. But I bring this up as something we should be familiar with because of the importance of what determinatives are. Okay, so remember this word, semantics. Semantics deals with meaning. All right. And then we have two other words that we have to be familiar with. And this is the word transliteration and what it is, and translation. All right. So what's the difference between the two? So we're going to start with transliteration. So what is transliteration? Transliteration is an orthographic endeavor by the conversion of a text from a source script to a target script. So when we translate the hieroglyphs, we're simply transferring the glyphs, which are the source, over into the English Latin orthography, which will be the target script. Now we have to remember that this transfer is not a transference of phonetics. So it's not dealing with how something is pronounced, or it's not dealing with semantics, which is what something means, but rather it's a convention in orthography. So thus, the issues of pronunciation and meaning are not addressed in transliterations. All right, so here are some examples with a Chinese script. So we see this symbol here in the Chinese script, two symbols, all right, or group of signs or symbols. And so what we would do, we would transliterate it from this script, which would be the source script, over into the Latin script that we use for English this way. And we would use a P, an I, and an N, and we have a diacritic mark above the I. And the same thing for the second symbol, we would transliterate it as Y-I-N. Now, in general, we would pronounce this as pinyin, all right? But the actual transliteration does not address the pronunciation or the meaning. It's just an orthographic endeavor. You're just transferring one script over into another, the source script into the target script, all right? And the same thing happens with mdw-ntr or hieroglyph. So we have this script, this symbol, three symbols, and we will bring it over or transfer it over into the target script as such. So we have RA for the first one, MS for the second one, and SW for the third one. And we would generally pronounce this Ra-Mesu. And this, by the way, this is the name Ramesses. Most people know as the famous Nisudbiti or King Ramesses. All right. So that's what transliteration is. So remember, transliteration is the transference of a source script over into a target script. All right. And we do it all the time. So I'm showing a example of something that happens every day, all day with Chinese. And then the same thing that we do with the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic system. So next we have what is translation. All right. Now there's a difference. So translation is the communication of meaning of a source language text by means of an equivalent target language text. All right, I emphasize meaning. So transliteration is a transference of script. Translation is that you're transferring meaning. Okay, so translations depend on knowledge of the language. So here's an example. So we're using the same three glyphs that we used before. So we have the three glyphs here, and we would transliterate it into the Latin script as before, R-A, M-S, and S-W. But then we would have to translate its meaning from the source language into the target language. So it would be Ra, Bor, Him. And then to make it make sense in the target language with the proper grammar of the target language, we would say something like, it is Ra who gave birth to him. And that's the meaning of Ramesses' name. Ra gave birth to him. All right. So those are the three terms that I wanted to make sure it's in the forefront as we discuss what are determinatives. So now we can move on to what are determinatives. And by the way, like I said in the beginning, if you're just tuning in while I'm live, I will check the chat. If you have any questions, by all means, ask them, or any comments, I will check before I end. But I want to keep this brief as possible, bite-sized, and hopefully you can learn something from this. All right. So now we're going to move on to determinatives. So exactly what are determinatives? So words spelled with phonographs usually have one or more signs added at the end that serve as classifiers to determine the range of meanings that are applicable to a particular word. All right. So therefore, a determinative is a device used to express the presence of semantic properties of a word. That is, its meaning. Remember, I defined semantics as dealing with meanings. So determinatives, the reason why we call these particular glyphs that come at the end of words determinatives is because of what it does. It helps determine the meaning of words. Now, some people may call them semantemes because it deals with meaning. All right. So it should be clear that this is what determinatives are, or how they function and its purpose, and how it benefits us reading the writing system. So here's an example. I'm going to give you a couple of examples to demonstrate this. All right, should drive the point home. So we have 3 examples with the word peret. Now, these 3 glyphs here, 3 in number, they are transliterated as PRT. Okay? And then we would roughly pronounce it as peret. All right? Now, in the Session Meta-Natural writing system, there was no documentation of the vowels. So for conventional purposes and for us to be able to discuss it and talk about it, we insert vowels, arbitrary vowels, just to be able to pronounce the words. But pronunciation is a totally separate subject and does not have a hindrance on us understanding the meaning. But for the purpose of this demonstration, so these 3 glyphs here will be transliterated as PRT. Now, these 3 words, all 3 of these words have these same 3 glyphs in them. And all 3 of these words are transliterated the exact same way. PRT for the first one, PRT for the second one, PRT for the third one. But are they the exact same word? Because if this is all you saw was a PRT, 3 of them, you would assume that it's the same word. But it's actually not the same word. All right? So how do we know that? Well, we know it by what's called determinatives. So this first one, for example, it has these 3 glyphs in it, but it has an extra glyph at the end, the circle with the dot in it. And so this particular word is peret, and it means season of emergence. It's one of the 3 seasons in ancient Kemet. And it's determined with a circle with a dot in it to show time. So here's the determinative. All right. Now, if that wasn't there, we would still just see these 3 glyphs. Let's go to the second one. The second one, we have the same 3 glyphs, and then we have 2 other glyphs here, 2 other groups here that serve as determinatives. If we transliterate the same, peret, but this particular word means fruit or seed, because the determinative here is a plow that's used for sowing seeds. All right, so it helps us determine the meaning of the word. And the last one, we have peret again, but this time we have walking legs as a determinative, and this time the word means to exit, to leave. And so the determinative here is legs showing motion. So had it not been for these 3 different determinatives, we would assume that these 3 words are the exact same, but they're not. So this is the importance of determinatives and why we call them determinatives. They help determine the meaning of the word. All right. Now, another example. We're going to go through 2 words for these 3 glyphs, which spell the word depit, and it will be transliterated as DPT, depit. And so we can see these 2 words have these same 3 glyphs in them, but we have an extra glyphs at the end of these words. These are the determinatives. So the first one is depit, but this one means boat. And we can easily tell that because it has the determinative of a boat, and that's the determinative. The second word is also depit, and it means taste, to taste something. And it's determined by 2 determinatives. One is a tongue, an animal tongue, and the other one is a kneeling man with his hand to his mouth. So these are 2 determinatives that help us understand the meaning of this word. So if I were to erase these determinatives, these words will look identical. And so we will call that homograph, because homographs are words that look alike or spelled alike. And that's what they would be, and we would be confused. But the determinatives help us make the distinction. between the two words. So they're very, very important. All right. Third example, and this is the last example. So here's an example with 4 words that have the verb when, and it would be transliterated as WN, and it means to exist. So we have these 2 glyphs here, hare or rabbit and a water ripple. As you can see, these 4 words all have those 2 glyphs in them, the rabbit and the water ripple. But they also have an additional glyph at the end, which are the determinatives. This particular word is transliterated as when, and it means open, and it's determined by a door. This is a door right here, and that's the determinative. The next word is when, and it means to hurry, like hurry up, be quick, be fast about it. Now this is determined by legs in motion, so it helps to determine the overall meaning of this particular word. The next one is determined by a bird, a sparrow, and this means fault or blame. It's also transliterated as when. And the last one is also transliterated as when, but it's determined by a hare, a hare determinative, and it means to strip off, to strip away. Okay. And so if it weren't for these 4 determinatives at the end of these 4 words, we would look at these 4 different words as identical words, and we would be confused otherwise. So this is the importance of determinatives in the language, and one of the ways that in which they function. All right. So they're a great benefit to our understanding of the language. Now, if you notice, all 4 of these words, and even in the other examples that I gave, all of these words will be transliterated the exact same way. And for today's pronunciations, we will pronounce them the same way. The first one is when, the second one is when, and when. So I bring that up because determinatives is strictly an orthographic phenomenon, meaning that it deals with the writing system. It's not something that it's not a device that's used in the speech, in the audible speech. All right, so it's in the writing. All right, and in reading this, we will be able to distinguish that these are 4 different words. Now, in ancient times, these 4 different words may very well have been pronounced slightly different from each other. As I said before, the vowels were not documented, so this first when may have had a vowel in front of the W, or a particular vowel between the W and the N, and it may have been an E sound, a short E. The next one may be a long A in between there, but we don't see that in the actual writing system itself because the vowels are not documented. So we can't distinguish homophones per se, and homophones being words that sound alike, because in our pronunciation today, all of these words would sound alike, but they're 4 different words with 4 different meanings. All right. So hopefully with those 3 brief examples, it's clear, to what determinatives are and how they function in the language. All right. And like I said, I want to keep this short and bite size. And so I'll look inside of the chat and see if anybody's actually watching, because again, I wanted to just put this into the group, and I'll start doing these short bite-sized tidbits of information to explain a little bit about the language, because a lot of people are talking about the language, and I'm seeing more and more people wanting to learn, not just for the sake of arguing and debating and things like that, but I'm seeing more people who generally have an interest in learning the language, which is beautiful to me. I've been teaching it for several years, at a beginner's level for several years, and I am this year I'm going to start a more advanced level of it, dealing with the grammar as well. So I'm looking for people who are actually interested, and I'm looking for those kinds of questions, and it's good to see that happening. So what I'll do is I'll create these short videos, and hopefully people can benefit from them and learn something, and actually seek out more information. All right. So let me check the chat here and see if I have any questions. See if I even have any viewers. watching, so let's see. All right, so I'm gonna say Hotep again. I actually do see 15 people watching. All right, that's good. All right, so I'll say Hotep to everybody. And again, if anybody has a question, feel free to ask. All right. But this should be straightforward. Hopefully I explained myself very well on here. Like I said, this is not anything long, drawn out. But while I'm looking at the chat and seeing any questions, I do want to let everyone know to visit our website, mdw-ntr.com. We have a lot of information on the website, different articles that have been written over, a few years. Some things that were originally posted on Facebook that made their way to the website, touching on different subjects that come up and people have questions about, from aliens in the glyphs, whether it's spaceships in the glyphs and temples, to Egyptian orientation, to the calendar, and also, of course, transliterations and translations from our group, Seshu Ma'ani Medu-Neter. All right. And by the way, Seshu Ma'ani Medu-Neter, I was asked this today, what does it mean? And it means loyal scribes of divine words. And we're inspiring to be true scribes of divine words. The word ma'a is a masculine form of the word ma'at. And it could be taken to mean loyal. When you say you're loyal to something, you're true to it. Or it could be truth or correct, accurate and straight. All these are different semantic shadings for this particular word, ma'a. So we use it in twofold. We're loyal scribes because we're learning. We're on a journey. We're still learning. There's a whole lot to learn about the language. And so we're inspiring to be true scribes with the language, meaning that, we want to be very proficient in it. The same way. Now, this title is an attested title that we've chosen. And so it's actually used in ancient Kemet in this particular way, where the king had to consult with the Seshu Ma'ani Medu-Neter of his time, the loyal scribes or the true scribes of divine words. He went to them to gain assistance in researching information in the Per Majat, which is a phrase for library. Per meaning enclosure, and Majat meaning document or scroll. So it's the place where the scrolls were kept. And today we would call that a library. So the Seshu Ma'ani Medu-Neter of ancient times assisted the king and others with documentation and research. All right. So this is the phrase that we've chosen to use. But anyway, please visit the website. Also another website, Sabo University. It's sabouniversity.com. And so this is a very a website in its very infant state, in hopes to grow into the equivalent of a Udemy website or Coursera, where you can get courses and take courses and learn and become certified, get certificates of completion in different subjects, from how-tos to history, African history, health, psychology, genetics, whatever the case is. It's a wide variety of different genres or topics of courses. Right now, there's not very much content there just yet, but we hope that it grows and receives participation and support by other teachers. So if you have a skill or knowledge that you want to put together in the form of a course, then please contact me, and I would love to see your work put onto the website and offered as a course to the public. And it can be monetized. You can make money to support your time and your effort and everything, and it's totally up to you. Lastly, if you would like to support, we have 3 books that are available. The first one is Has the Egyptian Hieroglyph Writing System Been Deciphered? A Rebuttal to Walter Williams. In that book, we address the decipherment issue, in terms of Professor Walter Williams. Now, most people will be familiar with the more recent debates or, arguments about that. But this argument, in terms of it not being deciphered, goes back to Professor Walter Williams. So we addressed his claims that he has in his book, and we addressed them in full.
The next book up top is a brand new book. Came out late last year. Simplified Sesh Meta-Ntr Penmanship. A full book 1, the monolithals, which is a book that teaches you how to actually write, scribe, or sesh, the actual Sesh Meta-Ntr, the hieroglyphs. And also the textbook, Beginner's Introduction to Meta-Ntr, the Ancient Egyptian Hieroglyph Writing System. All right, this is a book we use as a textbook for the beginners lessons. And soon to come out will be Rodney Kemet, The Language of Kemet, Ancient Egyptian Grammar, a synchronic descriptive grammar of the older speech of Kemet, written by myself. All right. So that will be out soon. So be on the lookout for that. And also classes to go with that. All right. So now with that out the way, I'm going to try to see if I have any questions inside of the chat. And let's see. So again, I want to say hotep to everybody. I would do a roll call, but I do want to kind of keep this brief. So I'm just going to dive right into any questions. Behudet Ma'at, will there be any classes on the philosophy behind some of the glyphs or terms, like the different meanings of him, Septepi, and the likes? Oh, time, not him. Okay, time, Septepi, and the likes. Yes, if anyone's familiar with our work as the Seshu Mani Meta-Ntr, we publish our pyramidal curriculum, and in that curriculum we have a procedural curriculum, step-by-step curriculum. We have 3 levels, and each level consists of 3 stages. And so what you're asking about is something that is going to be taught at one of those stages within the levels. All right. Level 1, stage 1 is the beginner's introduction to Sesh Meta-Ntr. Stage 2 of level 1 would be the grammar. Stage 3 of level 1 would be introduction to historical comparative linguistics. Then you move to level 2 and those 3 stages. And so what you're asking would be more so found in the second level, in one of the stages in the second level. So the short answer is yes, definitely. All right. Behudet Maya, another question. Is there any way you know of today to use Meta-Ntr as a divination tool? Wow, that's a good question. Wow, that's actually a topic in and of itself. And, I don't want to make it seem like I'm avoiding your question, but that actually will spark a whole conversation. So let me just keep it real short. In lieu of a whole nother conversation we could have, another video. Maybe we do a full-blown show on YouTube. But Meta-Ntr is a divination system. All right, it is attributed to Jehuti, the deity, or Netcher Jehuti, and he is known as one of his titles is Neb Meta-Ntr, the Lord of Divine Words, and it is a divination system, and you're asking today to use it as a divination tool, if we can use it today. And like I said, without getting too long-winded with that, I would first recommend people to learn the language technically first, because you would appreciate its use as an actual writing system, and then you can go and look at it in terms of a divination system and how it functioned as such in the past, and therefore how it could possibly be used the same way in the present or today, as you said. All right, so I know I really didn't quite answer your question, but we can reserve that for a whole lengthy discussion about that, because we have to understand what a divination system is and the purpose of it first, and then we can identify whether or not Meta-Ntr is a divination system and whether it would be effective to use it today. All right, so it will kind of take some time to really address all of that. All right, so let's see. MC Iron Lungs, yeah. I'm trying not to be MC Iron Lungs today. All right, so I don't see any more questions. And all right, so yeah, hopefully everyone got the gist of this. All right. So again, this is a quick lesson on Egyptian hieroglyphic determinatives, and the importance of them. All right. Now, not all of the words included determinatives. All right. You'll mostly find them on nouns and adjectives. All right. And we usually refer to nouns as substantives. All right. And there's a reason for that that I talk about in the grammar book. But basically, in early grammarian times, in the early grammarians, they actually didn't separate nouns from adjectives. They looked at them as the same. And it's reflected in the Latin terms that are used to describe these words, where we get the word adjective from, and we get the word nomen for noun or substantive. And you can tell that the early grammarians looked at these words as two ends of the same thing. And so in ancient Egyptian, or Rani Kemet as we call it, the determinatives you'll find on nouns. You won't find them on other parts of speech as nearly as much as you would on the nouns and the adjectives. All right. They're included on the adjectives because one, adjectives, the use of adjectives in Rani Kemet is slightly different than how we use them in English. Because in the adjectives in Rani Kemet can be attributes only. Like, for example, if I say red, the color red, we would say that's an adjective because it only denotes a property of something, like a description or describing something's property, that it's the color red. But now if I say red one and I add the word one on there, now I'm talking about a property and an entity together. But in Rani Kemet, this may all be one word. As in English, you heard me, I had to say two words, red one. In Rani Kemet, this may be one word, and it would denote a quality or property of something and the something itself. So, for example, the word nefer, it describes an attribute of beauty or goodness. All right? And we say it means beautiful or good. But it can also mean good one, the good one, in the word neferet. Neferet means the good one. So it's talking about the quality and the entity at the same time. And when it does that is where you will find determinatives. All right. So let that be known, and hopefully you all follow it and understand that. All right. So last check. See if there's any questions on here. All right, I don't see any questions now. I hope you all not scared now. I did say I want to keep this short, so I'm going to cut it short. So I want this just to archive inside the group and hope people can look at it and maybe ask questions later. I'll come back on this thread and check to see if anybody typed questions afterwards, because I know, like I said, I appreciate those who are watching. I didn't anticipate people watching because I basically did this unannounced, and I want to keep it short for people to watch and learn, and then you can type in your questions. But also you can inbox me. All right, so I'll try to keep this up and do these small little bite-sized tidbits of information, and also give me recommendations. Like, tell me what you want to know about or would like to see me cover in terms of the language. All right, and I'll do my best to get it done. All right, and keep it short. I'll even keep it shorter than what I'm doing right now. This is the first one, so I am kind of being long-winded. All right, as they say, these long goodbyes. All right, so again, visit the website. We are the Seshu mdw-ntr. Website is seshmedunetr.com. It changed from mdw-ntr.com. We rebranded the domain name to a more appropriate name, Seshmedunetr, which is talking about the writing system. All right, so hopefully, I'm trying to stall a little bit to see if there's any questions or comments, because people will watch and it. But anyway, all right, we got one. Brother Antonio Stovall, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. How can we use the language for practical application today? That's a very good question. That's a question I get asked a lot. And the short and skinny of it is that there's very little practical use right now at the very moment. That's the short and skinny answer. And the reason why is obvious, because there are really no speech communities that actually utilize it to communicate. All right. And when you don't have a speech community that's using it to communicate, then the purpose of a language, which is to communicate, it kind of goes contrary to its purpose. So there's very little practical use in that sense, because, you know, if you learn Spanish, you can speak to Spanish-speaking people, the Spanish community, Spanish-speaking communities, French, all these different living languages. All right. So in that sense, it's not very practical. But on the flip side, and this is what I have to explain to everyone who asks me the question, the benefits of learning it is tremendous. Although it has very little practical use in the way I just described, the benefits of learning it are, you know, off the meter. And you have to actually engage the language and learn it to really, really understand why I say that. And you really appreciate why I say that. The language is very, very, it's different than the language that we're used to, especially with English, in terms of its writing system and the language itself. You know, it actually encourages a paradigm shift. And one practical way of utilizing the language or learning the language is so that we can communicate with our history, our past, as far as the Nile Valley corridor goes. People often say, let the ancestors speak. Listen to the ancestors. Well, if we're to do that, then we have to know and understand their language. The ancestors did not write or speak in English or these Indo-European languages that that are prominent today. And so if we're to understand what they have left in stone and in documents, we have to learn the language. And so the benefit of that is that we all know that Kemet is one of the foremost civilizations on the planet in ancient times. One of the best civilizations on the planet. All right. Most people will agree with that. Different reasons, but most people agree with that. Well, if we ever ask the question, what made it so great? What went on in the genius of the minds of the people to create such a great civilization? The only way we could even begin to try to answer that question is to tap into the psychology and the minds of those people in ancient times. And they left a plethora of documentation for us to deal with. But it's not written in the languages that we speak today. So the benefit of learning the language would be for us to actually have a direct link into the minds of the genius that went into the creation of what we call ancient Kemet. So in that sense, it's very practical, and there's a whole bunch of more, a lot more benefits to it. But when people ask me that, they're asking me from a sense of a more right here, right now. Can it put money in my pocket? Can it put food on my table? And, you know, does it help me with that? And I just tell them straight, no, it doesn't. Unless you're a teacher and you monetize classes, courses, or whatever the case is. But otherwise, no, it's not for that reason. All right. So, yeah, I'm trying to catch up to some questions. Let's see. Hopefully, Brother Antonio, hopefully that answered your question. If not, then I apologize. You could rephrase it. How to search a dictionary. Need a refresher. Okay, so yeah, I'll do that in a short show. All right. Let's see. What else? With all the talk about the language, it would be nice to see people step up and just commit to learning it. That's very true. We need a conversation and phrases video for everyday communication. Okay. Now, let me say something about pronunciation real quick. I get this a lot too, pronunciations. Now, it's very, very normal for us to really focus on pronunciations, because when we learn a language today, such as Spanish or French or you know, any spoken language today, one of the emphasis put on the learning process is its pronunciation. Why? Because the language is a living language. People are using it. There's speech communities that utilize it, and you can actually hear the teacher teach you how to pronounce the words properly. All right. Now, there's a big difference between learning ancient languages that are quote unquote dead. One of the main reasons should be obvious is because there's no speech community to actually hear it and utilize it, to learn it and let it burn into your mind, so you'll know how things are pronounced and so on, and utilize it. So we have to learn this language technically. All right. And in the language itself, there's no documentation of vowels. So every word that we pronounce, like when we say the word unk, ma'at, all the words that people are familiar with, hotep, hetep, hetepu, tiu, all these different words, phrases, or people recite prayers. All of those are pronounced conventionally. And by that I mean where early Egyptologists, in order to pronounce these words, they simply agreed to put a arbitrary vowel in between the consonants. So like what you see on the screen, sesh, medu, netcher. Those vowels are not in the document, not in the script. So that's just a conventional way of pronouncing it, sesh, and then medu, and then netcher. All right. So, but that doesn't stop us from knowing what the meanings are behind those words. All right. And we often demonstrate this in our classes and things like that. So just remember, our today's pronunciations are all tentative. They're just conventional. They should never be taken as a claim to be historically accurate. The word unk most likely was not pronounced like that. The word ma'at most likely was not pronounced like that in historical times. All right. So there is a project, a very tedious and long project that has been underway to recover as much of the historical pronunciations as we can. Will we ever be able to be 100%? I don't think so, because of the nature of languages and the phonology and how the sounds in languages change over time. And then for us to retrace that and try to collect that data from speech communities that no longer exist will be very, very difficult. So there are some that we will be able to recover, and then there's others that we won't. So at the end of the day, there will be two things going on: convention and agreement, consensus, and then the historical accuracy. All right. So remember that, and let that be known. If anybody always ask you about pronunciations of the language, well, how you know it's pronounced like that? It doesn't matter, because the meaning, we utilize sounds and groups of sounds to convey meaning. That's what languages do, communication. All right. And the writing system is a visual representation of speech. So always remember that. Let's see what else. I'm here. Mo ain't going away. Okay. Yeah, Hotep. Like I said, I would do a roll call, but I want to say, I appreciate everybody watching. I didn't expect really anybody to watch. So let's see. Behudet, since the subconscious is affected by images, how does this language affect the minds of those who read it, being it's the only language I've seen that are symbols of the natural world? And are these symbols archetypes of the collective unconscious of these ancestors that wrote this, and was this their designed purpose? Hope this isn't too spacey. No, it's not too spacey. That's a good question. We have to remember that the hieroglyphs themselves, they are pictographs. That's what they are. Okay? But that's not how they function. Now, these pictographs that we call hieroglyphs, or glyphs for short, or teat in the language, which is images, these teat are images or replications of the natural flora and fauna and man-made objects that were in the environment of the Nile Valley Corridor, the people of Nile Valley Corridor. So that's where the inspiration came from. And notice that in the repertoire of the glyphs, that you don't see animals or flowers that are not generally native to the Nile Valley area, the entire corridor, you know, from the Mediterranean coming down. On our maps it would be down towards Sudan and even Kenya, Tanzania, and so on and so forth. Like, for example, you don't see a glyph of a tiger. You got to ask yourself that. If Asian, because tigers are Asian cats, if I'm not mistaken. But you don't see a glyph of a tiger. You don't see glyphs of flowers that only grow in Russia or some other isolated areas. Okay, so I say that to say that they utilize things that were in their environment for inspiration. So now to the other part of your question, in terms of affecting the minds, we have to remember that the glyphs are not functioning as pictographs. And you know the old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Now think about that for a second. If a picture or pictures are worth thousands of words, so if one particular picture is worth 1,000 words, then guess what? That's not a very effective tool to use to communicate messages. Because if I can write a picture and it's 1,000 possible words that it could represent, then that's not an effective way of communicating to you. Because now you got to choose, you got to guess which of the 1,000 words could I possibly mean for this one particular picture. So writing systems do not utilize pictures, pictographs or pictures for the function of a picture, to function as pictures. So, and I'm saying this for a reason. These glyphs are utilized for different functions. They are utilized for the sounds that they represent, which we call phonographs. They're used to represent full words, which we call logographs. And then they're also used to convey semantic meaning or mental constructs or ideas that we refer to as ideographs. Okay, now what are they? They are pictographs. How do they function? They function in one of several different ways. One is as a phonograph representing sound and not what you see at all. Two, they could function as logographs, which means they represent a word. Or three, they could represent a mental concept idea. And these mental concepts and ideas are contained in what we call determinatives, to give the semantic shading or environment to help us determine the meaning of the word. All right. So in that sense, that's how they function. So hopefully in answering that part of it, you'll understand that when we talk about the collective subconscious and things like that, one thing that the glyphs do, and this kind of ties into the divination aspect of the writing system, is that they also serve as mnemonic devices to deal with imagery and other parts. Because, like, for example, in utilizing English, and we write in a Latin script that we call English as well, our characters don't resemble objects that are in our environment. So we read our text utilizing very minimal amount of information. But if you were to look at Sesh mdw-ntr on the walls of ancient Kemet, your mind is bombarded with a lot more information. Why? Because your mind has to process the meanings behind what you're seeing, but it also has to process what you're actually seeing, because you're actually seeing replications of objects that you see out there in nature as well. And your mind understands and knows that. So it has to process all that as well. So it's conveying a lot more information in that sense. And it's because of that aspect of it that, you know, we get into other functions of how the imagery is used. All right. But like I said, to go into that part, it would be a long thing. So Antonio, that wasn't my intent when asking you. You answered my question. Do it. Okay. Hopefully that did that. Can't we just agree on the pronunciation and go from there like Hebrew? Yes, we can. This is from Darius. We could. and I know you're talking about like the resurrection or the revitalization of the Hebrew language. Hebrew was going extinct. Now there's a difference between dead and extinct. And so we need to know this and spread the word that the ancient Egyptian language is not extinct. It is dead, but not extinct. And the slight difference between the two is that dead means that there's no official language or speech community utilizing language in an official capacity. And the numbers of usage is minimal. Extinct is when the language is extinct, just like animals. It's gone. So we understand that ancient Egyptian language is still spoken in a form that we commonly call Coptic today. People are still speaking it. So don't let anyone tell you that it's dead in the sense that no one knows how these things are or meanings or sound, or no one is speaking it. That's just not true. It's spoken in the form of Coptic. And Coptic is an African language. All right? The confusion comes in with that is that Coptic as an African language makes use of the Greek writing system. So people confuse it and think that the Coptic language, which is African, is not African. And so we can clearly see the parallel with another example. Let's take the African language that we all agree that's African, like Swahili. Swahili, everyone agrees that is African. It's a Bantu African language. But guess what? It utilizes the English orthography or the Latin script to write it. But no one dares to call Kiswahili a European language or a Latin language. But for some odd reason, when it comes to Coptic, which is an African language, because it utilized the Greek alphabet to write it, people assume that it's not African. So we got to clear that up. So help me clear that up. And help us clear that up. Spread the word on that. Coptic is an African language. Let's see. Jehudi Ma'at. Are there any instances where the determinative classifier is rendered obsolete? Asking for a friend. No. The determinatives are there for reasons. They're not obsolete. You have to remember that the scribes often utilize what's called a quadrate system when they actually carved the glyphs and wrote them, whether it's on papyri or hard material like stone or wood. They use a grid system called quadrate system, and so they utilize the space economy. And when it became unsightly, they started to omit some glyphs, but the ones that they tended to omit are ones that are very, very common that would not hinder somebody understanding it from reading it. All right. So in those cases, sometimes determinatives were omitted, but they were never obsolete. That wouldn't be the appropriate word to refer to determinatives being obsolete. If you see a determinative there, it's there for a reason. You can't say that it's obsolete. All right. So, I got this picture up. Let me go back and just show you. So I'm going back to this picture right here. If I were to render these determinatives obsolete or ignore them, I really don't know how you could possibly make them obsolete if you're looking at them. Now, unless you're asking about the idea of determinatives in general being obsolete, that's not true either. None of it's true. The determinatives are there, and that's what makes the Session mdw-ntr so unique and beautiful, because they have many different elements within the language that convey different things. Determinatives are one. These are different teats that come at the end of words that help determine the meaning of the words. They're devices. All right. Some people refer to them as semantines. They help us with the semantics of the words. All right. So, like, let's just use some for example. Well, I mean, I've had these three examples already, so I'm not gonna try to create any more out the blue. But hopefully, Judy, that answers your question. No, they're not obsolete. They can never be obsolete. I mean, if we start cherry picking whether certain things are obsolete in a language, then, you know, we're in trouble. Behudet Ma'at, what are your thoughts on Kemetic yoga and the movements that are stated to be movements that if emulates the Necharu? Is this pseudo? Well, my thoughts on Kemetic yoga. Let me kind of answer a different way. I think yoga itself is a beautiful system. Notice I said yoga and not Kemetic yoga. I think yoga is a very beautiful system, and I think that a lot of these systems are self-contained, and I try my best to convey that to everyone that asks me these types of questions. You have systems that are self-contained. So, for example, a automobile. I always use an automobile or car as an example. A car is a complete system. It has tires, it has an engine, it has a fuel tank, it has a transmission, it has an air filter, you know, all the different components. But all the different components come together and form a complete system. And so I always tell people that you can't take a Honda engine and put it in a Mercedes and expect it to work properly. You know, now I'm sure there may be some mechanics that could really, really rig something up and probably make it work. So, but my point is that these systems are closed. You wouldn't expect it to work, you know, or whatever. So likewise, in these indigenous cultures, these civilizations and cultures, they have closed systems with different ingredients and different elements within these systems that work together and work very well together for whatever benefit and purpose that they were created for. So when we start to mix and match these elements within these systems, then we make it less effective. So my thoughts on Kemetic yoga is that I suggest leaving yoga where it is and learn it as it is, and learn it very well so it could benefit you or benefit people. But when you try to bring yoga into the environment of Kemet, then you are stuck with certain challenges. Instead, learn the systems in Kemet. Now, if it's just a matter of wording, like if people want to call it yoga, because I'm familiar with the word Simatawi being used as yoga, because the word Sama means to unite or unify, and Tawi is the two lands. So people will tend to use it figuratively, saying that the Simatawi is the unification of the higher self and the lower self, and therefore yoga is a practice to enhance and cultivate that and everything. Then you have the actual positions that people get into in terms of physically. So I will say this about the positions, that in the Kemetic or Kemeti artwork, the scribes were actually carving and drawing on a flat surface, three-dimensional scenes, and they did it in a very peculiar way. Sometimes you'll see two hands with you see two right hands, or the thumbs on you know, it looks weird because the thumbs are on both sides. And so these different vignettes or scenes that we see, whether they're deities or kings or the everyday people, they may look like they're in a weird position, bodily or whatever the case is, but it may not necessarily meant to be taken literally that they were in those positions. And so I do see people that will kind of render those positions that the scribes utilized a flat surface to represent a three-dimensional scene, and the way that they had to construct the actual carving and drawing as if it was a literal position, and then they find themselves meditating in those positions. And that's okay to do, but just understand that that's not historically accurate. But if people want to do that, that's fine. You know, I don't think I quite answered it, but you know, my thoughts on Kemetic yoga, I think yoga is beautiful. I wouldn't mind learning it, but I would not mix it with things, the systems that are in Kemet. I would leave yoga in the Indus Valley and utilize it just like feng shui, Chinese Bazi, Chinese I Ching. I Ching is their divination system. Feng Shui is their aerial, their spatial sciences of where things are located. Bazi astrology is a thing that they use. Qigong is another thing that's used in Asia. These things are closed systems, and they have great benefits if you utilize it within its environment that it's supposed to be in. But once you start cherry picking and pulling and mix matching, then you're creating something different. All right. So anyway, I kind of dwelt on that a little too long. Y'all about to have them on here for 2 hours. Yeah, you're right. And so I'm gonna keep this short. I'm gonna wrap it up. Let's see. I'm trying to get. What's another question? Save it with the elevator music. Yeah. It's just like some laid back music. It's not my music. I mean, I didn't select this actually. I mean, the songs. Let's see. Trying to see if any other questions. Is Middle Egyptian and Coptic two totally separate languages? That's from Second Ba'amun. That's a good question. Now, what constitute a language versus a dialect is a matter of a longer discussion. So I'll keep this short. Middle Egyptian is a different language to Coptic. But not being very proficient in both of them, it's hard to detect that distinction. So on the surface, it would seem weird for somebody to say that Middle Egyptian is different, totally different language from Coptic. The fact that you added the word totally lets me know that you have degrees of separation even in your own mind, because instead of just asking me is Middle Egyptian and Coptic different, you say totally different to kind of put emphasis on there. So but they are different. They come from two different branches of the Chiena-Intu language family, or family of languages, but they're very closely related. So they're very close related. So to a person who's not proficient in the very minute details of both, it will seem to be very much alike. All right. So hopefully that answer your question. All right. Now, just to kind of add to it a little bit, let's just take the difference between just to give you some more information. I'm sure you've heard of Old Egyptian, Middle Egyptian, Demotic, and Coptic. Well, you have 5. The Egyptologists will divide the languages of Kemet into, they think it's one language, into 5 stages. They'll say Old Egyptian, Middle Egyptian, Late Egyptian, Demotic, and Coptic. And so those 5 stages can be roughly divided into 2 halves. Old and Middle represent one half, or a line, and then the other side of it would be Late Egyptian, Demotic, and Coptic. The main difference between those 2 groups is what we call the synthetic languages versus the analytic languages. The latter 3, the Late Egyptian, Demotic, and Coptic, are analytic languages, whereas the first 2 I mentioned, Old Egyptian and Middle Egyptian, are synthetic languages. And that may go into a whole nother discussion, but in gist, one used morphology had more morphological elements to express different meanings and nuances than the other half, which instead of choosing the morphological route, they chose to use totally separate words. So, for example, if I wanted to make a word plural, and I'm just using this example to be the easiest to understand. In English, if I wanted to make a word plural, I would not, let's say the word book. If I want to make that word plural, I don't create a separate word. I just add a suffix to the word that I already have. I put an S on there, and I say books. That would be a synthetic way of doing that. Whereas an analytical way would be to create a separate word to denote plurality. So instead of me saying books, I would say book S, and S will be a separate word. It wouldn't be attached to the word book. So that's just a rough example of one of the differences that we clearly see between Old and Middle Egyptian versus late Egyptian, Demotic, and Coptic. And this is why in the later forms you have pa and ta for the definite article. In the Old Egyptian, they didn't have the definite articles, weren't there. All right. Definiteness and things like that were understood and not actually manifested or took form in the actual language itself, writing system. So just to give you more examples, but like I said, you know, we can have a whole conversation on that, and I'll be having more conversations on that dealing with the grammar. All right, grammar is something that we can't sleep on it, and it can't be microwaved either. All right. So, all right, it is definitely been way beyond the time that I was expected to expect. I wanted to keep this in a bite-sized chunk, so I may download this and chop it at the end of just, you know, what I gave on determinatives. But hopefully everyone followed along. And actually, the questions that I actually saw you all type, they didn't even deal with determinatives. So you all were just waiting to have like a build session, and we could do that too. We could, you know, I'll come on with the rest of the crew, the Seshu Mani Manager crew. We'll come on and have some discussions and take questions because we need some Q&A. You know, we haven't gone anywhere. You know, I've been absent off of Facebook. You know, some people like disable their accounts or whatever. You know, I just took a break from Facebook for a month. And then I spent a few days trying to catch up. And, you know, I went live in our Seshu Mani Metanetra group. And, you know, expressing my disappointment in the lack of progress that I see. You know, I see some progress, I see lack of progress, I see the same old arguments and things. You know, I'm not even getting into that or the drama. I'm not dealing with that. I'm a teacher. You know, I try to I've been teaching different things for a very long time, and so my niche is in a teacher's environment, a controlled environment. You know, like, for example, in school, we all went to school. We go to elementary school. There's a difference between your behavior and how you conduct and what you do in a classroom versus recess, outside of the basketball court or the playground at recess. At recess, you can cut up. You can have fun. You could, you know, do what you do. But in the classroom, it's time to get busy, time to get serious and get to work. The teachers say no talking. That means no talking. Behave yourself means behave yourself. Pay attention means pay attention. But out there on the basketball court at recess, that's when you can let loose and have fun. Do your thing. So we got to also do that with what we do even as adults. We got to know when to be serious, when to get busy, when to actually learn, and then when to have fun, entertain each other, and do all the other stuff. You know, and there's some cross-pollination between the two. You know, we don't want to be stiff robots and things like that. But my point, though, is that me, you know, I take education and teaching serious. So, you know, I come from back in the day of being very disciplined, having good character, and actually learning for the purpose of learning. And then once you learn, you can reward yourself with all the other fun and things like that, you know, because it's serious stuff. There's a lot to learn. There's a whole world out there, you know. It's a lot to learn. I'm still learning. Love to learn. I love to learn new things and things like that. But 2018, as I said, inside of the Facebook group, my tolerance is gone. My patience is pretty much done. You know, I'm not getting caught up into any of the same old arguments, silly arguments that have been addressed time and time again. You know, I'm here to share information, learn from others, and also hopefully people can learn from me. It's a two-way street. So if you want to learn something, then hey, I'm your man. And, you know, hopefully I can learn from you as well. All right. But if you want to do the drama thing and the back and forth, the argument, bringing up old arguments and silly stuff, immature stuff, and the instigation, tick for tat, all of that stuff, nah. You know, that can happen elsewhere. But all right, I'm gonna say Shem Imhotep. One last look at the any questions here. The determinative prepositions bit was very clear. I think most people here follow very well. I did. Okay. Dua for that. And yeah. All right. So got to cut this long goodbye. So I'm gonna say Shem Imhotep, and like I said, I'll do this again, and I promise I'll be a lot shorter next time, because I really was only planning on being like 10 minutes at the most. But the video will be archived. Hope people learn about it, and I will check back on to see if anybody asks a question. And also another thing, if you ever hear me make a mistake, or you think I'm in error, or you see something that I've said or wrote or presented in error, bring it to me. I welcome it. That's how we learn. That's how we progress. That's how we expand. That's how we cultivate our mind and expand knowledge in general. All right. And I think debating is a good thing if done properly. I come from a background of debating on amateur collegiate debating team, dealt with paralegal system, court system, which is nothing but a huge debate and things like that, from the street to the courtroom to the professional school environment. So I welcome it if it's done properly. All right. So I'm no stranger to that. All right. So anyway, I'll say Shem Imhotep, and I will see you all next time. But yeah, you let me know what other topic to cover. This was about determinatives. Maybe we can cover something else that's short. You all let me know. Either inbox me or type it in here. One more question. Are you going to put this lesson on YouTube? Yeah, I will. I'll download this, and I'll probably cut it from me rambling so much, and just put the actual lesson up on YouTube. All right, just at the slides. And I only had 11 slides, basically 8. The last 3 were really, hopefully people will support and check out the websites. We have Sabre University, seshmetanetra.com, and also the publications. All right. And check out our Facebook group, Seshu Mani Metanetra. We have these conversations all the time. And like I said, I've taken a little break from Facebook, but, haven't gone anywhere. And when you can take a break and you come back, you can start seeing things that you didn't see before, as well. And I'm telling you, 2018, the same back and forth stuff is just not for me. Now, I'm not knocking everybody. People have their thing and their niches and things like that. It's just not for me. So again, if you want to have some good talk, good serious discussion, we can have fun too. I like to have fun. I joke a lot as well. Anybody that knows me, anybody that takes my classes, knows that, I will definitely joke around and things like that, or whatever the case is. But I know when it gets serious. All right, can't microwave this. We got to slow roast it, put it in the crock pot. All right, but I will say Shem Imhotep, and I'll see you all next time.